Welcome everyone to today's workshop. I'm Danny Watkins with Zenith Performance Solutions, and I want to teach today a little bit about a little plugin that I'm using. This month, we've really focused on Rise. So last workshop, our first workshop, was all around how we storyboard before we create a Rise course, how we lay out content, how we storyboard the content, and then share that with our clients to review it. And this week, I'm sharing a little bit about this plugin that we have started using for this particular project we're working on. It's called Mighty. And then our third workshop of this series is how to bring in Storyline to really level up your Rise courses. So I always say that Rise is basically it has the potential to be just a PDF on steroids, or I equate it to the PowerPoint of the 90s. Without instructional design, it's just a tool that puts words on a page or words on a slide in the case of PowerPoint. And so it's really, really critical that we are using good instructional design to create learning experiences that are interactive and that make sure that the learning occurs. So we're going to kind of play around a little bit with Mighty, and I'll talk a little about how we're using it and some different things that you can do with it. So the first thing that I'll share with you is this is a Google plugin. So you have to be using Google Chrome. It's a Chrome plugin, and there is a charge to it, so you have to decide if that is worth the expense to you. It is called Mighty, and it is produced by a company called Maestro. And if you scroll to their page, it's at maestrolearning.com/mighty. And it has a few different things. So it has new blocks, like brand new blocks that don't exist in Rise that you can utilize. It's got mods, which are basically modifications, and those modifications are kind of peppered throughout the Rise tool. So I'll show you how to find those. And then there are things like power ups, which basically really just taking your design to the next level by adding kind of more advanced and customizable features. So you can watch their little video that sort of shows the differences and the additions that you'll get with this. And then you can try it. So I would highly recommend trying the trial before you purchase it for sure. Make sure that it's going to work for you. Make sure it's going to work for your organization. The other thing that you get once you start the trial is you also get access to their community, which is really, here's what I love about it. They're actually using the same platform that I use for my community. So it's really great because I don't have to go very far. My community, the CPS Ignite Learning, is right here. And then Maestro, I just added so that we don't need analytics right now. I've posted I've added Maestro, so it's right here. And what's really nice is that everyone here, for the most part, are instructional designers and developers. And if you go to Mighty users, you can have conversation around, how other people are using it, questions that you might have. And I'll tell you, anytime I've had a question, I go post it in here and I get an immediate response. It's very quick. So, a couple of questions that I know you might have. The first one is, do you need a subscription to actually, once you publish your Rise course, do you need a subscription? The answer would be no. If you publish it to SCORM and you put it on your LMS, it is fully functional. It packages all those features into the SCORM package. If you want to make updates to anything that you used a Mighty mod or a Mighty block for, then yes, you would need a subscription. In my case, I develop content for clients. So I have to make sure that if I am using this plugin, my clients are aware that in order to do updates to those blocks, they're either going to, number one, need a subscription to Mighty, or number two, come back to us to do those updates. And I never want to leave a client with something they can't update themselves. So I'm always very clear that we're using Mighty and it's an additional subscription if they want to make updates to it. Now, I have a lot of clients who don't intend on ever making up their own updates. And so for them, it's very easy for me just to do the updates myself. So just be really clear with your clients so there's no miscommunication if you are a freelancer. That's my advice. So this is a course that I have taught. I'll show you just really quickly here. This is a course that I teach. It's a disc course, and I have this introduction to everything disc, and I made a copy of it, a Rise copy, so that I can play around in it today. And this is just a small piece of e-learning that I send out to participants before I do an instructor-led class with them. So I either teach disc, everything disc, I either teach it virtually or I teach it in person. And there was a lot of content. I wanted them to have a little bit of background knowledge before I came. And so this is a really short little piece that they do before I come, and it just introduces them to disc. I created this about 2 years ago, and honestly, I haven't touched it since then. So it is a little dated, probably needs to be updated. And now with Mighty, I can do some fun new things with it. So the first thing I want to point out is you'll notice once you install it, I've got my Chrome extensions up here so I can see my Chrome extensions. I have a little toolbar that's up here so that I don't have to go dig around for it. And then once you install it, you get this little pink M logo. And if you click on that, it'll, it has this little welcome, and then you can scroll and see sort of what's here. If you go to home, this is where you can manage your account. You can go to the help center, which is actually really useful. They have a pretty good help. And then you can also go to the community or report a bug. So this is really great that it's right here kind of anytime you need it. The other thing that you'll find is when you go into some content, you'll start to see things that are in pink. So anything in pink means that it is related to the Mighty plugin. So you can see on this particular block, my style, I have a new Mighty style called gradient, and I can play around with gradients in a block. And so that is a Mighty, kind of a Mighty mod, if you will, a modification. I think that's what mod stands for. Maybe I'm just making that up. And you can see that I can play around with the gradient. You can actually see that on most of the blocks. So if I scroll through any of these blocks, if I wanted to make a gradient here, I could do that. And I could do linear, do circular. I could pick my colors and then see what my gradient looks like. So that might add a little bit of breakage in terms of kind of the color palette on, in your Rise file in terms of your background. And sometimes that can be really effective. And again, I go back to something another great instructional designer always says, and Mike Parkinson always says, if you've added a graphic element to your design, and he usually is talking about PowerPoint, but I sort of carry this over to Rise and Storyline too. Why did you do it? You should always be able to tell someone if they said, why did you add that gradient? Or why did you add that picture? Or why did you add that type of, let's say that you highlighted text and you changed the color of text. Why did you do it? And instructionally, you should be able to tell them why they did it. Did you do it because you wanted to break up the white background and give some emphasis to a piece of content or a word? What was your instructional purpose for doing that, or graphical purpose of doing that? It's always really important. So the other thing that you have here is you have, you'll notice when I highlighted some content, I have some pink portions on my floating toolbar as well. So I've got a different color for railway. So that is a font right now that is in pink. You can also see that you've got some font size, some different choices. So for example, I can take those, make them larger, make them bolder. I also have some difference in line, sort of this line spacing, or line height. So if I wanted the line height to be a little bit larger or smaller, I could modify the text in ways that might make sense. I just hit Control Z to undo that. And then I've also got this letter spacing. So if I wanted to really take a word and I wanted to, make it really different, I could use this letter spacing as well. And this might make a lot of sense if you had just one word in a block, let's say a heading block, and you wanted to space out the letters because they were an acronym, and then you wanted to put the acronym underneath them somehow. You could certainly create a graphic for that and bring the graphic in, but this just gives you another option for that. The other thing that you have here is you have this code view. So you can actually see the code that is making this function on the back end. So if you are an HTML code type person and you're familiar with that, you can come in here and make some modifications as well. I think that's massively powerful. And then just to close it, you just close it on up. So those are just a few of the things that you can do. And I'm just going to undo a few things, but a few of the things you can do around text. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can add new blocks. And so, again, anytime you see pink, that tells you that there's something new and different. And it's either a mod or it's a full unique block to Mighty. So for example, over here, you have these Mighty blocks, which we'll come back to. That's all in pink. Those are unique blocks to Mighty. So again, you can create those. You can publish this to SCORM. You can put it on your LMS. They will function just fine. But if you want to make updates to it, you would have to have a subscription to do that. Then you have a little pink dash. If you see over here, a little pink dash next to list, multimedia, interactive, knowledge check, and divider. That means there's something in there that's a modification to that item. So I'm going to start with list and show you. So you can see we've got modifications. It indicates it right here. I've got a mods, and mods. And I can see right here that I've got it for all three. And if I insert a list, two things are going to happen. I still have this little pink over here where I can make it a gradient, right? The other thing I have is over here on the right, I have a little modification, Mighty Mod icon as well. So if I click on this, I can actually do a few different things with numbers. I can change the circle color. I can change the number color. I can change the margin between the words here and the bullet size. And I can change these from numbers to other items. So why might you use this? So where this was really powerful, in my opinion, is often if you've created your theme, it automatically assigns what color these numbers are going to be in. If you are trying to make something accessible, you want to make sure that your content is accessible. It's really important that you use colors that have the appropriate amount of color contrast. So if you're not familiar, the easiest way to do this is to just do color contrast checker. You can go to Web AIM. You basically put in your foreground color, you put in your background color, and it will tell you if it is accessible. You want it to pass on the contrast ratio. So you want to pass. If it fails, it means that your colors are not contrasting enough for anyone who is visually impaired. So it's really important that I love this feature because you now have the flexibility to make sure that these, like this one right here is probably, I'm going to guess, like if I know the hex codes, I'm going to guess they're not quite accessible. Now let me just stray for a minute because you'll notice something new in this color palette. And that is this little guy right here. I have wanted this for the end. I mean, since the end of time. What I normally used to do is I would have PowerPoint open and I'd use the little dropper over there to look at the color. I might take a screenshot and then I'd bring it into PowerPoint, and I'd use I have a little tool called Color Picker. That's a little executable, and I would use that. But now I don't have to. Now I can actually use this little dropper, right? And I can come over and I can actually see different colors that I have, and I can match them if I need to, right? So it has a little bit of power there. I'm going to undo that. Oh, actually, I'm just going to change it here. So I can kind of see what's happening, and I can see what colors things are, and I can change them. I can also change the number color. So again, I would want to make sure that these are accessible to anyone who's visually impaired. So this would not be accessible. I can guarantee it. However, if I change this back to white, then we've got an accessible little bullet here. Or number here. So the other thing I can do is I can change the margin. So if I click this to small, you'll see that text move. I can change it to medium. And then I can also change the bullet size. So I can make the numbers smaller, I can make them medium, or I can keep them at large. And one of the items I really love is that I can do numbers, lowercase letters, uppercase letters, Roman numerals, or uppercase numerals. So you've got a few more options there. Again, this is a Mighty Mod within the list block. I can also then revert it back to the original. The other things that I can do, I'll just show you a different mod within list. So let's take a look at just the bullets. So similar thing. I've got my little Mighty Mod. I've got small, medium, or large. I really like being able to make these a little bit larger. I like that I can adjust the margin again. And then again, I can change the bullet color if I need to match. Okay. So let's take a look at Let's take a look at multimedia. So again, you'll see which of these have mods. So audio, it's got a mod. Video has a mod. Our embed has a mod. And so I can kind of scroll through and see which ones have it. So let's just go with, I'm just going to go with audio for now. And then again, once I click here, I've got the style that's always been there. And I've got this little Mighty Mod over on the right here. Now it says audio play as a block enters the view. So what this is going to do is rather than the user have to click play, it'll autoplay as soon as the block enters. So it does say you've got here, due to browser restrictions, your audio may not autoplay if the user doesn't have any interaction before the audio block. So here's my recommendation to kind of get around this a little bit. What I have found is that if you enter a divider, and when you enter that divider, if you make it required that they had done some things above it, so, oops, I went there. If you make it so complete the block directly above, then when they click this, I haven't had any issues where this doesn't autoplay, and it autoplays really nicely. So if you want to make sure, like where this has been useful for me is I had a really complex diagram underneath the audio, and it was really critical. Now they could download the transcript and they could read it, but it was really critical that they heard the subject matter expert describing this graphic, because it was all around hardware and system connections. And so I wanted to make sure that it played while they were looking at the graphic. So rather than put it into Storyline and animate it and do all of that, I could have done that, but in terms of what we had estimated for the project, we didn't really have that many hours to spend on automating all of that and syncing it all in Storyline and bringing it in. So this was our option. So we had it autoplay instead, and it worked brilliantly. I would recommend having these content dividers in here so that it doesn't automatically play, especially if you have other elements on the screen. Let's say you had two of them, they could potentially play at the same time if they were both within someone's screen view, and you can't necessarily know what somebody's resolution is going to be on their monitor. So I'd highly recommend sort of surrounding, like in this case, I'd probably duplicate this and I would move him I'd move him down, and then let's just pretend, we're pretending right now, pretend that this is the audio and this is an image. And then I've blocked it out so that it's going to be nice and contained when somebody's going through it. So that's just my food for thought. Okay, so let me show you a few more. I could spend days doing this. So I'll try not to take up too much time. Let's go to interactive, and I'll show you some things on interactive. So on interactive, we've got a couple of different mods. We've got one on process right now, and we've got one on scenarios. And I think, whoops, I think that might be it. Oh no, we've got a few more. I forgot. We've got some on buttons, and then we've got some on storyline. So let's just take a look at the process one, and we'll show what that looks like. Okay, so this is just one mod that you have on this particular process block. We're all familiar with kind of how these process blocks work. If I go to the Mighty Mod, it is simple, right? It is just a tiny, tiny little change, but I can't tell you the number of times that I've wanted to use this, and I can't remove the word step. Now I can change the word. Like I could say idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, or I could say question 1, question 2, question 3, but I can't actually remove that darn step. So look at that. Now it's gone. Now I can actually use this process flow any way I like without the word step there. And so it's the tiniest thing, but it's so helpful when you are designing, and you want to sort of, I always say, try and break the tool. You basically try and use these blocks in ways they weren't intended from a creativity perspective, to make things more interactive. And it's the simplest change, but it really makes a difference. Okay, so let's try a different one here. I'm just going to delete a few things so I don't get a totally messy file. Okay, so let's just try, let's do another interactive here. Let's look at scenarios. I think this one we're going to come to Mighty Blocks at the very end, but let's just try scenarios, and I'll show you some different things we can do here. Now, scenarios are a little, in my opinion, a little limiting in Rise. So I would say 75% of the time, if I'm doing a scenario, I have a great storyline template that I use all the time. I drop in the content, I make sure all my triggers are working properly, and then I pull it right in as a storyline block, to be really frank about it. So this is one area that I think Articulate could do a lot of work in, but you do have some mighty mods here that I want to point out. So the first thing that I think is helpful is you can hide the character throughout. So if you don't want a character at all, you can get rid of it. And I truly love that, because sometimes you have a scenario around a product or around just a situation, but you don't necessarily want a character for one reason or another. Again, go back to what the words I steal from Mike Parkinson, and that is always have a reason for why you're doing things. So if you've removed the character, there has to be an instructional reason why you've made that choice. It's not just because you just don't want a character there. Hopefully you have some instructional reason that you removed the character. Or if you leave the character, you have a very good instructional reason for leaving the character, because they're sort of presenting this scenario, or the scenario is about that character. So that's my soapbox. Okay. You can also remove the background blur, which is really helpful. And so you can kind of go through and play around with that a little bit. So I'll come back to scenarios in a minute. You just hang in there. So, okay. How are we doing on time? I think we're okay. Okay. So I want to talk to you a little bit about knowledge checks. Actually, before I do that, let me show you this one, because I'm sure you'll want to know this one. So there's some different things you can do with button stacks. But I also wanted to show you the storyline one. So in the storyline one, if I click on here, I can actually hide the play button on interactive storyline blocks on touch devices. So it's not a big change, but we find that so many people are accessing our content via via mobile or touch devices, that play button could be really useful to hide. So that's just the one small change that you can see there. Okay. Now, let me show you knowledge checks and some things that you can do here. So there are some mods for knowledge checks. So you've got a mods for the matching, for the fill in the blank, for multiple response, and for multiple choice. Those are the ones that you have there. So let's just go with multiple choice first. And I'll show you the changes you can make here. So again, not huge, but really beneficial. I love that we can change in and out these colors of buttons, because sometimes your default colors are not accessible. And so you've set up your theme colors. You have to set them up that way because those are the colors that the organization uses, but they're not necessarily going to be brought in an accessible way. And so you can change, again, your label color. You can change your button color. So again, I can change this to, let's say, blue. I can change my border. So I can give it a border. Let's say I want it to be a little bit thicker. I can do that. I can also do a drop shadow. So if I wanted a drop shadow, right now it has none. I could add more of a drop shadow, and then I can choose the border color as well. So if I needed to change this to, let's say, blue, let's see if we can get that to show. And then let me just do a quick preview so you can see this. I've got this choices in here, and I've got, oh, it did not update my color. Okay, let me go play with that again real quick. See, make sure I left it that way. Button color, I sure did. I updated it, but it's not grabbing it. So this isn't a situation. I'm going to check, make sure I didn't do anything wrong. And if it's not user error, I'll open a little bug for that one. Okay, so let's go back to these. And let me show you. You've got some for dividers. Again, the mods here are pretty straightforward. In this case, you can already guess probably what it's going to change. That button color, the label color, the border, the drop shadow, things like that. Let's see if it'll actually change it properly. There, that it changed that. I can make the label font size smaller or larger. I can make the spacing larger or further apart, so I can play around with that. I can do a border radius. Look at that. So if you just wanted a simple change, you could do this. And then you can also do a label color. Let's make it purple. I don't know why you would do that. And I can make the button color. Let's just make it, let's say you wanted to make it gray. You could do that. And then I could give it a border. Let's see if this is going to work this time. It works here. So it definitely is an issue with this knowledge check. And then I can also put in a drop shadow if I wanted to. So you can do some customization there. Okay, so those are the big things. Now let's talk about, or those are the little things. Let's talk about the Mighty blocks themselves. So again, over on my block library, I've got this Mighty blocks. And here's where you can have a little bit of fun. So if you have a block idea, you can join their community and you can share your ideas. They're always looking for those. I want to talk about all of these, but let me talk about transition first. So transition, let me tell you how I used to do this. And actually, before I found Mighty, this is how I always did it. And I'm not going to demonstrate it, so hang with me here. I would go into PowerPoint and I would create, or Canva. I'm a huge Canva user. So I would go into one of those tools. I would create an image of a block. And so quite honestly, you guys, I use Canva the most because Canva already has great little border images that I can then bring in. And I have all the Rise kind of sizes that I know I need. So I just create a project in Canva of exactly the size that I need. And I pull in these borders, and then I would actually add an image block here. And then I would take out all the spacing. So if you're unfamiliar with that, I should probably show you. So if you have an image here, let's just add an image really quick. Let's add this image. I'm going to add a full image. And then if you take out the spacing, so you take out the block padding, you can do that. And then when you bring in your image, you can actually make it look like a transition. The other way that you can do it, so you can do this a couple of ways. The other way that you can do it, because that one has a little caption on it, the other way that I do it is just do text. And then I take out the text. And then I go in and I style it. I style it with an image. And again, then I make sure that all that top and bottom blocks are out. And then I have a really nice break. So that's how I used to do it. But now I can do this even quicker by adding in this mighty block. So from here, I can go into edit. I can decide what I want it to look like. So let's just pick, I can do a line, I can do a shape, or I can do an image. My images, I can replace the image. So again, if I've already created it somewhere else, I can do that. I can change the color of the background. So let's just go with purple. And I can give it padding or no padding. So again, that didn't change, but I'll figure that out. Let me replace the image. I don't know. Let's just grab this. So this is just a YouTube graphic actually that just popped up here. So we'll just show you how this looks. So then I've got this graphic in there with no padding and I can play around with that. So the other way that I can do it, if I can go into shape, let's just do this one right here. And I can go into custom settings. I can make it sharp. I can make it square. So let's do sharp. I can play around. I can flip it vertically. I can make it responsive, which I always leave on. I can change the amplitude, make it really flat, or I can make it really curvy. I can change the frequency. So if I wanted something more like this or that, I can do that. I can change the roundness. And then I can change the offset as well. I can also change the color. Right now it's just inheriting the background, which is fine. And then I can change the padding as well. So there are lots of options here and definitely play around, but this is a really great way to separate your content and help the learner see chunks of content as they're going through. This, by chunking your content, you're enhancing the learning experience. Rather than just reading this, again, PDF on steroids, by chunking some of this content, I help the learner connect those concepts and I help them navigate through that page. And then I've got lines. I can add all kinds of things, simple designs. So that is the mighty block. That is the transition. I think that's the easiest one to talk about. The next one that I want to talk about is the hotspot question. So the hotspot question enables you to add hotspots where your learner has to identify something. Now, the caveat to this is we know that when we do hotspots in a tool like Articulate Storyline, those become inaccessible. So it's really important that if you have accessibility requirements, that you're probably going to have to stay away from hotspots. So if you come over here, you can, let me just do that again. So right here, I clicked on the little edit pencil. And then I can replace the image. So I can put whatever image I want in there. I can change the image width. So I can make it full width. I can make it medium. And then I can start putting in a prompt. So identify the planets whose names begin with M. And then I can click on the image to answer. Here's that text. And I can give them hints. Show when a learner fails to find the correct hotspots. So I can choose to give them hints after a certain number of attempts. or I can, and then I can enter some hint text. Here is your hint. So if I fail it twice, I'm going to get that hint. And then when I'm ready, I can close. And right now we've got those hot spots on here. So I didn't even touch them, but I could change their feedback. So I've got feedback here. I can, move them where I need them to go. I can change their width, their height, and their radius. And so there, I got it right. Oh, I did not get that one right. Oh, here's your hint, because it was my second fail. So on something like this, you might set it a little bit higher, but you get the idea. So that's a hot spot. Okay, the last two that I want to talk about is this one I love. This is the reflection. So here's how I used to do it. So what I used to do is I might have a question like, what do you know about DISC? And I might say, so let's just do this. What do you know about DISC? And then I would have them type in the field what they know. And then I would have them click a button underneath that says, here's what our experts can tell us, and I might have this expert response. So you can do a couple of things. You can add multiple questions. You can post the reflection answers to your LMS using SCORM 2004, and they'll give you some information around that. You can also allow them to download their responses. So this would be really powerful for me for this content, because I actually have them do this before they come to class. So I could ask them some questions around DISC, especially, let me show you an example of how I might use this. I've got this Discovering Your Own DISC Style, and they actually have a handout that they go through. But instead of using the handout, I could actually have them do step 1. So they do step 1, and then I could have them fill out a reflection. And what they could do is then bring that reflection document with them to class. So for example, let me go back here. What do you know about DISC? I could have them fill out their reflection. I could have them just bring that PDF to class with them. I could enter that post download message, and I could add multiple questions that I want them to answer. And then we talk about it when they get to class. That's their pre-work. You could also have them submit it to a mentor or to a buddy or to a manager or something like that. I think this particular block is so powerful because the way I used to do it was mostly in Storyline, where I would just create a text box that they could type into. But I never had a really great way to download their reflection and have them bring it with them. I could have used some JavaScript, but that is not my area of expertise. And so I never did that. I would do it kind of as an ask the expert, or just a reflection that they didn't necessarily submit anywhere. Or if I had them do it, I would have them download a Word document in which they were filling out as they were going through the content, and then they'd bring that with them. So it's a little bit more manual, and I love this block. Like, it just brings me joy. And then the final block that I want to show you is the interactive HTML. So this allows you to embed custom standalone HTML into Rise. This, my friends, is not my area of expertise. And so definitely I would need, like, I want to use this more, but I have not played around with it as much because it's just not something that I'm super skilled in. So I can drop or browse to upload a file. So if I've got some HTML within my file, I can do that. And then I can add CSS, JavaScript, and I can actually modify this text. Now, the only thing that you can get into some trouble with is if you have a client who blocks, something like that in their browser. So I would definitely do this, test it, make sure that it displays properly in for your learners, because if there's some security settings around JavaScript or some things like that in the company, you might run into some issues. So definitely test that. So what do you think? Super powerful. it's definitely worth 30-day trial. If you're doing a lot of work in Rise, then this can really enhance your work there. If you're not doing a ton of work in Rise, then it may not justify a subscription. You're going to have to kind of make that decision, but it is a powerful tool to really enhance the instructional power of your content. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in our membership site and I will be happy to answer them. And I hope you all have just a lovely day. Thanks, everyone.